This Earth Day, hydrogen became cheaper than oil. And within days, the world was hit by the largest energy disruption in history. Not a warning, not a simulation. An actual collapse of the most critical energy artery on the planet. And while labs were publishing breakthroughs and cost curves were falling, and the clean energy press was celebrating, 20,000 sailors were stranded in the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. That's the story nobody is telling cleanly. And it's the most important energy story of 2026. Let's start with the science, because the breakthroughs are real and they deserve to be taken seriously. For decades, hydrogen fuel cells have lived in a frustrating space. Promising in theory, difficult in practice. The basic concept is elegant. Feed hydrogen in, get clean electricity out. Water is the only byproduct. No combustion, no CO2, just electricity and vapor. The problem was never the chemistry, it was the plumbing. Inside a hydrogen fuel cell, water is produced as part of the reaction. And that water, microscopic amounts of it, gets trapped. It pools in the wrong places, it blocks oxygen flow. It chokes the cell from the inside. Engineers called it flooding, and fixing it meant adding expensive management systems, pumps, humidifiers, pressure controls, that added weight, cost, and complexity. Systems that made hydrogen impractical for the applications where it matters most: aviation, heavy freight, long-haul shipping. Dr. Quentin Meyer and Professor Chuanzhou at the University of New South Wales decided to attack the problem differently. Instead of managing the water after it accumulated, they redesigned the cell to give the water somewhere to go before it could cause damage. Using precision microengineering, they introduced channels 100 micrometers wide, thinner than a human hair, into the internal structure of the cell. Lateral bypasses, escape routes, the water flows out, the oxygen flows in, the cell keeps running. The result was 75% more power output than conventional designs, a lighter, cheaper system, less reliance on platinum and other costly metals, and a patented design that can be scaled. I believe airplanes will be powered by hydrogen fuel cells in the very near future, Dr. Meyer said after the research was published. That's not a reckless claim. That's what a researcher says when they've actually solved the problem they set out to solve. Meanwhile, on the production side, a different kind of breakthrough was quietly reshaping the economics of green hydrogen entirely. The standard way to make green hydrogen is electrolysis. You run renewable electricity through water, splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen. The problem has always been the oxygen side. Oxidizing water into oxygen is slow, energy-hungry, and requires expensive iridium and platinum catalysts. It's been the stubborn cost floor that kept green hydrogen out of reach for years. A joint team from China Agricultural University and Nanyang Technological University found a workaround. Instead of oxidizing water, they oxidize glucose, sugar derived from agricultural waste, wheat stalks, corn husks, the leftover material from harvests that gets burned in fields or composted away. The glucose gets electro-oxidized into format, a commercially valuable chemical used in preservatives and pharmaceuticals. That means the process doesn't just make hydrogen cheaper, it generates a revenue-producing co-product that helps pay for the entire operation. The math works out to 1.54 per kilogram of hydrogen, below gray hydrogen in many markets, below the industry's long-held $2 target, and achieved not through cheaper solar panels or bigger electrolyzers, but by changing the chemistry itself. That distinction matters. Most breakthroughs in green hydrogen are really just cheaper electricity flowing into the same old process. This one changed the process. That's rare. That's the kind of innovation that opens entirely new cost trajectories. Not incrementally, but structurally. So yes, the technology is genuinely improving. The breakthroughs are real, the cost curves are real. Now let's talk about what happened next. On March 16, 2026, commercial shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz dropped to effectively zero. The strait is 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. It sits between Iran and Oman, and through it, every single day under normal conditions, passes roughly 20 million barrels of oil, approximately 20% of all the oil traded globally by sea. Saudi Arabia's exports, the UAE's, Iraq's, Qatar's liquefied natural gas, the fuel that heats homes and runs power plants across Europe and Asia. By April 19th, 3 ships had transited the strait. 3. On a normal day, that number is 140. That's not a slowdown, that's a system shutting down. The IEA called it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Not the worst in a decade, not since the 1970s oil shock in history. As in, nothing we have ever experienced compares to what happened in that narrow stretch of water over the past several weeks. As of today, the International Maritime Organization reports that 20,000 mariners and 2,000 ships are stranded in the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. Carriers are rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to delivery times. Freight rates have surged 3 to 4 times. Cargo delays at major Indian ports are running 40 to 49 days. Airlines are flying longer routes that burn significantly more jet fuel, at a moment when jet fuel prices have more than doubled. Refineries in Asia cut output by 6 million barrels per day. Stock markets are declining globally. Bond markets are selling off. The economic cascade is severe and still accelerating. And here's the detail that should stop everyone who celebrated Earth Day this week. Not a single kilogram of green hydrogen reduced that impact by even 1 barrel. That's not a criticism of the technology, it's a statement of fact about the system. Let's be precise about what this crisis actually reveals, because it's easy to draw the wrong lesson here. The wrong lesson is, fossil fuels can't be trusted, so we need to accelerate clean energy faster. That's not incorrect exactly, but it misses the deeper point. The deeper point is this: the Strait of Hormuz didn't fail because of fossil fuels. It failed because of system dependence. The world built its entire energy infrastructure around a single choke point over 100 years, and that infrastructure has no substitute. Not because we lack the technology to build one, but because systems take decades to construct, and we haven't built the alternative yet. Now map that against where hydrogen actually stands. The global clean hydrogen pipeline has surpassed 1,500 projects. That sounds impressive, but only about 7% of announced hydrogen projects have actually reached final investment decision, the point where financing is committed and construction begins. The rest are announcements, feasibility studies, letters of intent, paper. Infrastructure barely exists. Hydrogen pipelines cover a fraction of the distance that natural gas pipelines do. Refueling networks for hydrogen vehicles are sparse in most markets. Industrial consumers, steel makers, chemical plants, refineries have not meaningfully switched away from gray hydrogen, which still accounts for the vast majority of global supply. And utilization, the economic engine that makes any energy system financially viable, remains deeply uncertain. A hydrogen plant that runs at 40% capacity doesn't just produce less hydrogen, it produces hydrogen at a cost structure that can't compete, because the capital investment is spread over too few kilograms. This is the utilization trap, and it is quietly killing projects before they start. The honest picture looks like this. On the technology side, production costs are falling, fuel cell efficiency is dramatically improving, and catalyst innovation is reducing dependence on critical materials. Genuine progress across the board. But on the system side, infrastructure is fragmented and sparse, project completion rates hover around 7%, utilization remains deeply uncertain, and crisis replacement capacity is effectively zero. The Strait of Hormuz didn't catch hydrogen off guard because the technology wasn't ready. It caught hydrogen off guard because the system hasn't been built. And systems, pipelines, storage facilities, distribution networks, refueling infrastructure, industrial offtake agreements take 20 to 30 years to construct at scale. That is the gap, not a technology gap, a system gap. Every year, Earth Day does something subtly harmful to the energy transition. It frames progress as proximity to victory. Costs are falling, Mao, therefore we're winning. Projects are multiplying, therefore the system is working. Breakthroughs are happening, therefore arrival is imminent. But the Strait of Hormuz doesn't care about cost curves. It doesn't care about laboratory results. It doesn't care about 1,500 project announcements. What it revealed and what it proves is that the world is still organized around a fossil fuel system built over a century, optimized across every decade, financed by trillions of dollars, and embedded into every corner of industrial civilization. That system is geopolitically fragile. We've known this since 1973. It is subject to conflict, disruption, and deliberate weaponization. The Strait of Hormuz is its Achilles heel, and 50 years after the first oil shock, that Achilles heel is still fully exposed. But here's the uncomfortable truth that Earth Day consistently avoids. Fragile and functional beats resilient and unbuilt every time. The fossil fuel system is fragile, but it works. It has pipelines and tankers and storage facilities and distribution networks built over a century of iteration. It delivers. Even under stress, even under attack, Even with 3 ships instead of 140, the alternatives get routed around the Cape. The prices surge, the system bends. It doesn't break cleanly. Because systems never do. They limp, they adapt, they survive. The clean hydrogen system is resilient in theory. Locally produced, geopolitically decentralized, immune to Hormuz-style choke points by design. But it doesn't exist yet at the scale required to matter when a crisis hits. The breakthroughs are real, the costs are falling, the technology is here. But when the system was tested, when 20 million barrels of daily flow dropped to near nothing overnight, nothing replaced it. That is the verdict. And it leads directly to the only question that actually matters going forward. The next time this happens, and it will happen, the question won't be whether hydrogen works. We already know it works. The $1.54 per kilogram production cost is real. The 75% efficiency improvement is patented and scaling. The chemistry is solved. The question will be whether we built the system in time, whether the pipelines exist, whether the storage is in place, whether the industrial customers have converted, whether the refueling networks are dense enough, whether the projects that were announced actually reached FID instead of dying in feasibility studies, whether the 7% becomes 70%. This is what the Strait of Hormuz crisis actually teaches us. Not that fossil fuels are unreliable, which we already knew, but that the window to replace them is not unlimited. Every year the system isn't built is another year the world remains hostage to a passage 21 miles wide. Another year where one geopolitical shock erases every cost curve breakthrough that happened in a laboratory. The technology story is over. Hydrogen won that argument. The cost is competitive. The efficiency is there. The breakthroughs are coming faster than anyone expected. The system story is just beginning. And it is the only story that matters now. Earth Day said we were ready. The Strait of Hormuz asked if we'd actually built anything. The answer in 2026 is not yet. The clock is running.